Thank you, and welcome to the Patriots 300 Level Podcast. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by my co-host Kevin. Welcome back for a bonus episode this week where we'll be discussing Tom Brady's retirement and everything Tom Brady. As a reminder, you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Pat's 300 Level Pod for up-to-the-minute updates and commentary on news of the day. So, Kevin, I know last week you said, I don't know if it was exactly 0% chance that he was not retiring or 0% chance he was retiring. How did the retirement hit you? Did it take you by surprise? What are your thoughts?
It took me a little bit by surprise. I did give it with the caveat where if Brady, it would not surprise me if Brady could not get his way in Tampa. So I think it's a combination of two things. One, I was shocked when first the Schefter news came out. We were going to do an emergency pod that night, but then more conflicting Schefter news came out afterwards where it was like, oh, well, maybe he's not retiring. So didn't really want to post something if we didn't really know the full info that was coming out. It still shocked me today, just the fact that it's actually supposedly happening. I'll give it the caveat of something we'll talk about later on this. But I still think that if it wasn't for Giselle, if it wasn't for Arians, I think he'd still be playing for another 5 years. So I don't think it's entirely something that's his decision. And he did mention that it's not just him making this decision. I think it's more of a hand of one, Giselle doesn't want to play anymore. And then two, even if he was to play again, does he want to go back to Tampa where they're going to be having to rebuild this team and he's going to be 45 years old and he's not going to want to go through another rebuild. So is he going to find a team that could make that championship run? I think the 49ers is still an option, but we can kind of discuss that a little bit later.
Yeah, no, for me, I was shocked Saturday when it came out. Like I said last week, seeing his demeanor both during the game and then after the game of the Rams game I've never seen Brady that calm after a loss. And he was more just like enjoying the moment. And that, like, I know the last couple of weeks leading up to it, I kind of just started getting this eerie feeling similar to when he was leaving the Patriots that I think there's a chance he's going to hang it all up. But just given how he kept saying that he wanted to play till he was 45, and that's something he's been saying the last like 8 years, I figured he has one more year left on his contract. The team is still pretty good. I know that, like you said, they're going to be possibly going into rebuilding mode. But if he stayed there, I feel a lot of players would still take discounts to stay with the team to play with Tom Brady. So I don't think it would be as much of a rebuild as some people might think it might be. Given the year he had where he should have gotten MVP, and if the writers knew this was his last year, they would have given him MVP. They just were putting themselves in a pretzel to give it to Rodgers because they love Rodgers. But given how well he played, he never started to show any decline. And that's why I thought that he would still end up coming back another year, that he'd have to. I feel it's more Giselle. Obviously, I think if it was entirely up to him, he'd be coming back. But my thoughts of what led to it are Giselle for 8 years hounding him, please retire, please retire. But since he still loved the game and everything, he wanted to keep coming back. But I think Arians this year, especially, last year was his first year away from Brady or from Bill, so it was just learning a new system and everything. But this year, this is all conjecture, but my guess is he was just not happy. And Giselle was saying to him, if you're not happy, especially if he's coming home after practice, coming home after games, just frustrated with Arians and the whole situation, why go through this another year? You're already won without Bill. Why put yourself through that if you're not really enjoying yourself?
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we kind of agree there, where it's kind of both of them. I think Giselle probably plays more of a role in it.
Yeah, I agree.
And especially from, I know we both don't really believe Wickersham a lot in a lot of the reporting. And this could just be also something that he made up where I could make it up probably too, just thinking of what would happen where here's just a quote I'll read from his article of the weekend. For years, Giselle Bundchen has been clear in her public stance that she would prefer that her husband walk away. In private, she's more blunt. She's similarly the best in the world of her craft and retired to help the family. During the season, she lived in Boston, the cold and dark, a big city that got small really fast if you happen to be famous, to say nothing of a global celebrity. This is definitely coming from her mouth.
Yeah.
And then there's this other quote. In the off season, she would ask her husband, "Is this a Tommy day or is this a family day?" It was often a Tommy day. Wickersham continued. So I could definitely see her nagging, saying,
Yeah.
"Tommy day or is this a family day, Tom?" So I could definitely see her being a big part of this, and I could definitely see her giving like an ultimatum or something along those lines. Or I could
Yeah.
also see something where it's kind of a combination of both, where you had mentioned where maybe she had said, "You're not this happy, you're not happy at all. Why are you doing this with Arians?" And having he's definitely didn't want to kind of play for him again. So either the power of move failed and they kept the Arians, or it was kind of something where he just didn't want to go back. So
Yeah. The one thing though that still kind of like blows my mind is still how he's been saying for so long, play to 45. I know in
mhm,
August he turns 45, so he could have retired in August when he was 45, but
mhm,
still, like he was saying, he wanted to play until he was 45. He's still playing at an MVP caliber level. He
mhm,
hasn't declined. And then even earlier this season, he was talking about how maybe he wanted to start play until he's 50. So it's not that long ago where he was still envisioning playing
mhm.
long. So I wonder if there's something behind the scenes where just Arians just kept getting on his nerves more and more, or if it's just that this whole grind, especially if there's some reports that Arians kind of just left it up to him to run the offense and everything. If since he had to do a lot more with the Bucks than he had to do, we think he had to do with the Patriots. If it was just mentally and physically more exhausting, since he had to do everything, whereas Bill and Josh would come up with the game plan, come up with the scheme and everything, whereas in Tampa it's pretty much all on Tom to do everything.
Yeah, I think that's a big part too. That he just didn't want to do it anymore after all the work. You may be thinking, and other people do it in their jobs. Where, what am I doing all this work for? Like,
Yeah.
what's the benefit of this? Is it something that I should be doing something else, or what's the point? So I could definitely see that happening. I'm saying I'm 45, I've won 10, so I've been to 10 Super Bowls. Um,
Yeah.
is it really worth doing this? All this extra work
Yeah.
for the dealing with this idiot. So,
Yeah. And then
um,
even just the Rams game, for instance, he's down 27-3. He
mhm,
leads a comeback to come all the way back to tie it with 38
mhm,
seconds left to have Todd Bowles lose the game for him.
yeah,
So I could see him that I think he made up his mind before that, but just like
mhm,
that's just a nail in the coffin of I did all this work, I did everything, and then
mhm,
still the coaches are idiots and I can't like
yeah,
it's out of my control.
yeah. There's there's only so much he could do. He's probably thinking. So,
Yeah.
um, I think one of the other big parts for today of what happened is what do you think of him not mentioning the Patriots or New England really at all in his retirement, other than that brief Instagram story caption that he did on two different Patriots related posts? Is it something that you think was intentional, and do you think what do you think the whole reason behind it was?
I don't know the reason behind it. I could see part of it that when he left New England in March, I believe 17th,
Mm-hmm.
2020, or whenever March 2020, he gave a very long post thanking New England and everything. But still, for your retirement, to saying you're leaving the NFL, to not even mention them once, it rubs me the wrong way. I know some people are saying that Tom doesn't owe us anything as fans or everything. Some people are saying the way that he left, he's still annoyed or pissed off with either Kraft or Bill or whatever. But still, not even to thank like New England. I'm not saying that I deserve a thank you or everything, but I think Portnoy kind of put it well in his one of his. I know Portnoy posted a lot of videos today, but his most recent one after Brady thanked Portnoy and the four for getting arrested outside of NFL headquarters. What Portnoy was essentially saying was, yes, now it seems everyone loves Brady, but 5-6 years ago, that wasn't the case. The media was trashing him, trashing his legacy. It was pretty much just the Patriots fans that were supporting him through thick and thin, no matter what. Only ones defending him, and for him in his retirement to not even think the organization, but b even the fans as well, kind of just rubbed me the wrong way. But I don't know if maybe they have something if he plans on having a thank you later on, like
Mm-hmm.
signing a 1-day contract, retiring a Patriot or whatnot. But I don't know. I was just gonna say something, but I completely lost my train of thought.
I could take over. So I think when I first read it, I actually didn't really think much of it at
Yeah.
first. And I was like, oh, they probably have something planned. And they'll be doing like a ceremony, that sort of thing. They probably just don't want to make it all about the Patriots and
Yeah.
kind of thank Tampa because he's still technically a Buck. But then the more I thought about it, it was like 8 or 10 different slides you had to go through to
Yeah.
read the whole thing. 971 words in this whole thing, and he couldn't have a sentence. Like it just I think it's something we've seen the last, I would say his last maybe 2 to 3 years, maybe 2 to 4 years with the Patriots, where kind of that pettiness
Yeah.
and just the change really in his persona um was something that still kind of carried over where it was definitely not something that was just mistakenly left out. It was
Yeah.
definitely purposely done. You don't go releasing something that long without having multiple people look through it, without him having the final stamp of approval. He was with the Patriots for what
20 years.
20 years.
They're the only
It's
team
not
that called his coach to talk about him before the draft too.
so it's not something that he's just got to forget that he played there. So when he was thanking Michigan, he's thanking his agent, he's thanking pretty much every single person that's touched his entire career. And the fact that he just left out 20 years, it's definitely something that was purpose. And I think what's going to end up happening is I think it's a whole kind of shot at the Patriots in the organization. I think that he's still upset that it had to come to this, where maybe one of the reasons why he's upset too is the fact that he's having to retire right now because he's with this bumbling idiot that's of a head coach. Where if the Patriots just signed him and extended him, he might still be playing because he's not doing as much. Even though he still would be because they don't have the talent on the roster. But that's just another thing.
But it's also a catch-22 because part of the reason why he left was also he wanted more control. Yeah. And then that was one thing. He wanted more say in the game plan. He wanted more say in the roster construction. And he ended up getting that, but it probably made him part of the reason why he had to retire early.
Yeah.
But like I thought initially when I saw it, I wasn't sure if maybe he just has something special planned afterwards, but I just don't get it. Even when Peyton Manning, like some people are saying he was with the organization for so long, he wanted to thank his new team that he was with. Someone brought up the point that when Peyton Manning retired, and early on in his retirement message, what did he do? He thanked the Colts. Yep, he just won a Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos. He was with the Denver Broncos for 3 years. He thanked the Colts when the Colts released him. It's not that the Patriots released him. Depending on which source you believe, that supposedly they wanted him back. They just didn't want to commit long term to him, but they still wanted him. He was the one that ultimately decided to leave. He's so I just don't understand at all. And I was thinking maybe we'd see something where in the coming weeks we might see a retirement 1-day contract. But the more I think about it, I don't know if we are. I don't even know if when he's inducted to the Patriots Hall of Fame, if he'll even be at that ceremony.
Oh, that's a little ridiculous. I think he'll do that.
No, I don't know. Like, I think that I'm not saying that he's gonna hold a grudge to the Patriots forever, but I don't know if that's something that it's big enough moment for him to come back to New England, especially if he's traveling all over the world for TB12, if he'll make time in his schedule for that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that he'll do is he usually does this pretty well, where even though he's snubbing them probably purposefully on this, he's going to come out in the next, whether it be week or 2 weeks, and have some sort of thing dedicating to the Patriots. Either it be that last episode of Man in the Arena, and maybe it's a big long thank you to the Patriots and that sort of thing, or a big long video post or something like that. But the fact that with him knowing that, people just think that's all fine, even though it's not. So I think this was like not an inadvertent, but it was a snub that he kind of wanted out there. But then he's going to play it the other way in a week or two and say, oh, no, everything's fine. And dandy, all that sort of stuff, just to get people kind of talking. But I think it was definitely purposely. I think it's been 2 years. Yeah. So I get you still may be upset with him, but everyone else that's been, and I don't need any sort of thank you or anything like that. But it's the right thing to do in that situation.
It just rubbed me the wrong way.
And it's just something I think we've seen from him more and more over the last 5 years or so, where he's kind of been different than what he was before. Not that I'll ever not like him as much as I've always done, but it puts it more into perspective what we were kind of seeing towards the end. And it's like, oh yeah, this is still kind of type of guy now. So,
and then also for me, like I know after he left, I was bitter that he left. I understood why he did, but it still upset me that it was more him abandoning New England. But granted, I don't know the full story. I wasn't there. I don't know everything, but how he left, he was. What did he do that first off season? He went to OTAs and he was rubbing it on social media. Hey, I'm at OTAs after skipping OTAs the past few years. So like that kind of like rubbed me the wrong way then, where I still was rooting for him, but not really. Like part of me wanted him not him personally, but his team not to succeed. So he kind of saw grass isn't always green on the other side. But after the Bucks game this year, week 4, I got closure where I kind of felt in a good place as a fan, because I know if Brady stayed, the Patriots wouldn't have been able to win 2020 or this year. The Patriots got their quarterback of the future, and then Brady was able to get one more. So it was kind of the best of both worlds. And then also after the game, he was saying all positive things about New England. He was praising Belichick, which he hadn't talked about Belichick the last 2 years. He was praising Kraft and everything. So it seemed like that kind of buried the hatchet, but this kind of brings it back where he's still petty about it. So I don't know. That was my thought on it.
Yeah, and it's kind of just funny too, just thinking about the difference between this and then even I haven't watched any of it, but from the clips I've heard, well, pretty much all of the Man in the Arena episodes, especially some of I think the later ones, he's been kind of like overly kind of praising the Patriots. So it's just interesting to see that he'd go from one end of the spectrum just to completely leave something out. And as Felger said today, this is really the record, like the thing of record for his retirement. This is going to be when someone looks to see what was his retirement thing. It's not going to be the video 2 or 3 weeks from now or that press conference with the Patriots. It's going to be that post that he put out where he purposely left off.
If he does a one-day contract with the Patriots and retires a Patriot, I think that would be, people will consider that as well. But if he doesn't, I think that this is a lasting memory.
Yeah,
something that will be remembered about it.
All right, so kind of going on to some more happy things with Tom.
Yeah.
What would you say? I know we both started following the Patriots pretty young, so I'm not really sure what your first memory was. I was 9 at the time, but I actually still remember it pretty vividly where I was watching it. So what would be? I'll just ask you what your first memory is, and I can kind of talk about mine. But what's your first memory of Tom?
So for me, I didn't start following any sports until 2001. Why I didn't before or after, I don't know.
Oh, you did after.
What?
You started following.
After I know why. But I don't know like why I didn't start following like earlier or things like that. Why I started following 2001. I remember we were in, I believe it was, let me see the exact. So we were watching our dad and you and I think were watching the Patriots game in our living room, and they were playing the Buffalo Bills at Buffalo. And I remember I saw someone was different at quarterback, because I knew you were a very big Drew Bledsoe fan. And then I saw there was someone that wasn't number 11 at quarterback. So I was like, who's that at quarterback? My dad was like, Tom Brady. It's like, how come he's playing instead of Drew Bledsoe? And then he said he's better than him. I was like, oh, okay. And then I still remember that game. That was the first game I ever watched. Patriots ended up winning 12-9, where not a single touchdown was scored, all field goals. That was my first memory. And then I still remember that was the first game I watched. I remember watching the rest of the season, the Carolina game, the playoffs, then watching him get injured at AFC Championship game. After AFC Championship game, they go to the Super Bowl. We end up going to Target in Smithfield, and Dad buys us both Tom Brady jerseys, and the rest is history. But those are my first memories. Yeah. That Bills first game. I don't remember Dolphins the week later, and then Panthers the last week. I remember watching that, and then every game thereafter.
Yeah, I remember for some reason the Panthers game very vividly.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know why, but I think because that was the game that they clinched to get the bye, right?
No, I actually remember this too. They won. They needed to win, and then they needed the Raiders to lose to the Jets, and that was the game later on in the afternoon that we watched.
Yeah. So my first memory, I would have been 9 at the time.
Yep, I was 7 at the time.
So those
Or
kind of
just turned
dates.
8.
It's so my first memory was the Colts game where David Patton had he was I think the first player since
Walter Payton.
Walter Payton, yeah, to throw for a touchdown, run for a touchdown, and catch a touchdown pass. So I just remember how much offense they had in that game. We're actually at our grandma's house watching it on her like really dated TV at the time. So, but that was the first thing I kind of remember of Tom, just about how dynamic that offense was for that game. It wasn't something that was the typical for the Patriots that whole season. But I'd say that was my first memory. My second memory was, and I hate to admit it, but it was hating Tom Brady because he was taking Drew Bledsoe's spot when they announced that Tom was going to be the starter and that Drew was going to be the backup. And that was something that really upset me because ever since I was a young kid, I don't know how old I was at the time, as I don't know, maybe 4 or 5. We used to go to the Bryant College training camp where they used to have it back there before they had Patriot Place and everything like that. And one day when Bledsoe was walking off the field, usually they went to another end, did autographs, but he walked over to where we were. And he said, "Hey, big guy," and then threw me a football. So ever since that time, I was probably 4 years old at the time. He was probably my biggest hero growing up. So it was really upsetting when he was being benched, and I had some irrational hatred towards Tom at the beginning. But that was kind of the second biggest thing I remember of it. But a little funny nugget to have that.
Yeah, we won't mention you rooting for the Bills against the Patriots after Bledsoe was traded to the Bills, but
we've all made mistakes. What would your favorite Tom Brady memory be?
There's honestly so many. I don't have a particular favorite one. I think obviously back to the early 2000s, because those were when I started following the team. The 2001, the Super Bowl drive. Just throughout the years, but the ones that really just stick in my mind are just some of the big games where they needed a comeback and they got the comeback. 2014 versus the Ravens, 2014 versus the Seahawks in the Super Bowl, 2016 versus the Falcons, 2018 versus the Chiefs. I'd say those are, at least for me, like my top or my favorite memories because of how great those games were and how they needed Tom to be Tom in order to win.
Yeah, I think this is a really tough question, and something I still don't have really an answer to yet either. I'm going back and forth between 2014 against the Seahawks, and just because too, how good it felt having them win after what happened with Deflategate and all that sort of stuff.
It was the first Super Bowl they won after Spygate too.
Yeah, so that was a lot of emotions where, like, you guys think we're all cheaters, all that sort of thing. And then and you could even see it in Tom when he accepted the Lombardi trophy, when he screamed out, just kind of like a release of everything. Between that and then the Atlanta game was just unreal. And the amount of, I remember specifically coming home because we watched one of our friends' house, and I literally could not sleep for probably like 4 hours. I probably only got like maybe 5 hours of sleep that night just because I was on such a high from that whole game. I would say those are probably my two favorites of everything, but it's really hard to say.
And those are good ones too. Like the Falcons game too. Like I was saying, I was mentioning on Twitter from our account was, I think out of all his comebacks, that's the most, I think to me, the most impressive because of, no team had ever come back from 10 points in a Super Bowl. So that's the first one. It's the first Super Bowl they won in 10 years. But also how good that Seattle defense was. And for Brady to just absolutely shred them apart. It's not like the Falcons one is improbable because they were down so much, but we've seen them come back from pretty big deficits before, and the Falcons were completely gassed in the second half, and they had just some mental errors. This was just Brady completely tearing apart the best defense. What some people were saying since the 86 Bears.
Yeah, so, and I think he had like a 145 quarterback rating in the fourth quarter, which is nuts.
When he was essentially just throwing the entire time.
So that was the part. That was the other part, just how much he was able to put them on his back. Yeah. Of all the games you went to, what was your favorite related to Brady?
My favorite will always be for Brady moments. My favorite regular season game I've been to, 2013 versus the Saints, the Kembrell Tompkins touchdown in the end zone.
My favorite would be, I don't remember the year. It was the Denver Broncos game where they were down.
I think that was 2015.
Yeah, they were down, I think 20. It was close. It was either 28-3 or 24-3.
They were down 24-0 at that going into the half.
And they ended up coming back. That was I don't know, actually, that might also be my favorite Belichick moment where Belichick takes the wind instead of taking
2013. It was the same year as 2013.
All right. So that was one of my favorite memorable ones, just by thinking that no one was giving him a shot going into the second half, and the fact that they came back and won that game, and just how much Brady outdueled Manning in the end. You could see the difference when Brady had to go against the wind versus when Manning had to go against the wind, and Manning couldn't do it. He couldn't throw into the wind. And
that was also Manning's historic season too, where he threw for 5,500 yards and 55 touchdowns. It's not the Manning of 2015 where he could barely throw the ball 10 yards.
Yeah, but he's also always had kind of that noodle of an arm where it's not the best spiral and everything like that, where Brady was able to cut through the wind really nice, and Manning had such difficulty going against it. So that was one thing I thought that really stood out in that game. Of Brady's records, what's the most impressive to you? I think we're probably going to both say the same thing.
There's so many, and I think that they're going to revolve around the same thing. I don't know if it's 14 conference championship appearances, 10 Super Bowl appearances, 7 Super Bowl championships, or the fact that he has the record for being the youngest quarterback to win the Super Bowl. I think that was broken the next year, but at the time he was the youngest quarterback to win a Super Bowl, and he's the oldest quarterback to win a Super Bowl. I think that's just insane to think about. But there's just so many that it's just unfathomable.
I think the obvious one would be the 10 Super Bowl appearances in 20 years as a starter. Half your time being the starting quarterback, you're going to the Super Bowl, which is nuts. Where I think the next closest is 4, right?
No, I think Elway had 5. I believe it's 5. I think the most ever is 6, unless that's 6 wins. Yeah, Elway's 5. And then Montana, Manning, Bradshaw, Jim Kelly, and Staubach have 4.
Okay, so even that, it's half the amount of what Brady has for the amount. So I think that's probably the most insane, impressive number of it.
And also, it's during the salary cap era. It's not like the Montana Bradshaw's early years where you pretty much had the same team regardless for a year in, year out.
Yeah. Next question. Where would the Patriots organization be currently if they've never drafted Brady?
I don't know. I really don't know. Do I think they could have won a Super Bowl if they never drafted him? Yes, I do, because I really believe in Bill Belichick. But we saw, they started out the 2001 season 0-2. They would have been, I don't know who their backup would have been, if it would have been Damien Heward, which was supposed to be their backup going into the year, but Brady outbeat him, or if they would have someone else as the backup. Then once that season's done, Bill would probably get a pass for that because of that. Do you go with Drew Bledsoe going forward, who obviously we know isn't really the same? I don't know. I think they could have definitely won some Super Bowls, but I think that's no guarantee. So I really don't know.
I think this is also a tough one too. I think they would have won. The big thing is who they have at quarterback, because I don't think Bledsoe would have been quarterback for much longer, because we all know that Belichick wasn't a big fan of him.
Yeah.
Um, so the big thing is who did they end up getting at quarterback? But like we know, kind of how there's been a big change since then about how kind of the league is. Where
Yeah.
back then it was a lot easier to kind of win with kind of a lesser quarterback.
Yeah. The
Um,
year before it was Trent Dilfer. The year after it was Brad Johnson.
Mhm. So we kind of look at those defenses that the Patriots had in 01, 03, especially 04.
Yeah.
Um, they probably would have won one or two Super Bowls even in that span. Would they have won it in 01? Probably not, because I
Yeah.
don't think you have the backup quarterback to handle that situation.
Yeah.
But 03 and 04, the team was definitely good enough where they would have at least won one of those or gotten to the Super Bowl.
I
Um,
agree. If you have that defense, that you have a shot.
mhm,
But the thing I don't know about though is when Belichick took over, he took over a team that was 9-7. They made it to the
mhm.
playoffs one or two times with Pete Carroll. I don't know how long. I know Kraft gave up. He put a lot on the line to get Belichick, but he went
Mhm,
5-11 his first year. He started the year 0-2. We don't know how he would have been in 01.
mhm.
03 might have been, or 02 might have been the leash. So if he didn't turn things around quick or have one more year, that's why I just don't really know how long Bill would have had to. I believe in Bill as a team builder, that he would have, if he had enough time, he'd be able to put
Mhm.
out a competitive roster and make the playoffs and have a shot. I just don't know how much time Kraft would have given him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I still think they would have gotten something done. I believe
Yeah.
enough in Bill where, um, we've gone over this conversation a million times. Who's more important? And I think we both kind of think it's kind of a mutual,
Yeah.
thing. If you had to say which way the pendulum swung, I'm always going to go team over Tom. Not much. I would say probably 55% Bill, because looking at all of those runs, the defense was a huge part of that team.
Yeah.
Um, and especially in looking at 2018. Um, so I would say they would have in the last 20 years, assuming that Bill is still here.
Yeah.
I think they would have probably won. They won 6 Super Bowls, so I think they would have won 2 to 3.
If Bill was here the entire time, I agree with that. I
Mhm.
just don't know if he would have lasted that long.
Um,
So I know you just said that for the question, who's more important to the Patriots' success the
mhm.
last 20 years, Bill or Tom? I know you said Bill.
Yeah.
I agree, but I think it's also important to note that I don't think that we see at anywhere as many Super Bowls without either one.
Yeah.
01, 03, 04. Yes, Brady was a big part of that, especially when he had to lead the comebacks in 01 versus the Raiders and in the Super Bowl versus the Rams. And then 03 having to playing in some tight games versus the Titans, and then in the Super Bowl having that game-winning drive for the field goal. But I still think if another quarterback could have done that, I don't know if they would have gone to those spots specifically, but I think with Bill, it was more the defense. 2014, I don't know if there's any other quarterback that versus that Seahawks defense comes back
Mhm.
from down 10 to win. 2016, I don't think there's any other quarterback that comes back down 28-3 versus the Falcons.
Mhm.
So those two specifically, I think Bill's team building and coaching got them to that point. But without Brady, I don't think you win those two Super Bowls.
Mhm.
2018, I think you can win that Super Bowl with another quarterback. But as we mentioned before, I don't know if there's many quarterbacks that would have beaten Mahomes in Arrowhead in the AFC Championship game that year. So
Mhm.
that's why I have to give it to both of them. I think Bill's defense is the reason why they won the Super Bowl. I don't know if there's another coach that would have brought down the Rams offense that much to
Mhm.
Bill and Flores. But so I credit that to Bill, but without Tom, I don't think you get there in the first place.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's a pretty big cohesive, and you can't really definitely say one over the other.
Yeah.
So I think we're both in agreement there. I think the other part that has to be that people forget too is, um, Tom was developed by Bill
Yeah.
and Weiss and McDaniels. It wasn't something where Tom just came in knowing everything and doing everything. And I think that's a big part of even the Bucks' success with Tom, where he was able to implement everything he learned here. Um, with Tampa and make them have the offense run the way it did. And we kind of look at how they looked at the beginning of last year, where they were kind of struggling a little bit, and Tom didn't really fit the offense that Arians was known to call and what Leftwich was calling from the Arians playbook. And then probably halfway through the year, they ended up making more of a switch where Tom was implementing a lot more of the Patriots style offense, a lot of those quick throws, a lot of the different over the middle throws. And that's when the season changed a lot. So would he have done as well without Brady, without Belichick? No, because he would have learned as much. So that's where they kind of both helped each other out, where Tom was able to learn a lot from Bill, and I'm sure Bill was able to learn a lot from Tom in the way he thought. So I think it's impossible to ever go through this question, because people try and make a big radio talk when they're saying, oh, that one's definitely more important. No, not one is more important in this situation, because number one, you're not factoring in what this player has learned from Bill over the years, and McDaniels and Weiss and Bob. So
no, I agree.
I think that's a big point. How many Super Bowls do you think Brady would have won if he didn't have Bill?
It's tough to say if he was in with this roster, or are you giving him the fact that he was given this roster just a different head coach? Or are you crediting Bill also as the team builder without Bill the
Bill's
team builder?
Not the team builder. Bill's not. Let's say he has a generic average coach. He has, well, not Mike McCarthy because he blows.
Is he starting off as the 6th round pick where he's second or third on the depth chart, or is he starting out as Tom Brady as the starting quarterback?
Starting out, let's say someone else drafted him. Let's say he landed in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
That's actually a good one, because the Steelers went to 2 Super
AFC
Bowls?
Championship. Steelers went to 2 Super Bowls. They went to the AFC Championship game in 2001.
That's a good one. Yeah. So let's say he went to the Steelers. How many Super Bowls would he have? And what if he had started? Would he even still be with the Steelers? Would he have been cut and went somewhere else?
That's where I'm hesitating, because I don't know if you say he was drafted by the Steelers 6th, 7th round. Mm-hmm. I could see them easily cutting someone, because you don't know what you're actually getting from them in training camp. So assuming he makes the opening day roster and isn't cut, I could easily see him beating out Cordell Stewart within a couple of years. Cordell Stewart made it to the AFC Championship game, and he wasn't even that good. Mm-hmm. They had some talented teams. They had a good coach, at least with Bill Cowher before he retired. Mm-hmm. They won a Super Bowl with someone who we believe is one of the most overrated coaches. Granted, seeing how he was able to keep Antonio Brown and all that saga in check for 9 years, I give him credit. Yeah. I think he could win maybe 4 or 5. I'd say probably 4. I'm just thinking, because you give him that team where from 2012 to 2018, you could argue the Steelers are the most talented team in the NFL. And they just, because of the coaching, because of Big Ben being he's a tough player, but he's like, I don't know, mentally soft's the right word, but he's not Tom Brady. I could see him with that talent on the team winning some Super Bowls where they didn't even make it to any. So that's where I'm hesitating, where if he has that loaded of an offense, he could have done some damage. And they won 2 Super Bowls without him, with Big Ben. I could see him winning maybe 4.
What about the Giants?
In 2001, he'd be getting on a team that's talented that made it to the Super Bowl. He wouldn't have started over Kerry Collins in 2000. But they won in 2007. They won in 2011. But they had in between, outside of those 2 Super Bowl wins, they had they were devoid of talent a lot of the time, especially the last 5 years. So I'd say 2, maybe 3.
Okay. So I think that's a fair question to ask, because then the Steelers, I think, was a poor choice for me to ask, just because of how well they've been.
Yeah. Without him. I think you could argue they, just with the talent they had, maybe even more than 4 or 5.
I think an average team. So any average team, I would say 2 to 3 you would have.
I agree.
So I think the same kind of as Bill. I think they both have around the same amount over the years, just based on, and then having them combined is where it kind of elevates and they get those ridiculous numbers. Next question.
I'll have you start that one.
We're going to rank the top 5 NFL players all time and starting with number 5. So the 5 and 4 were really tough because it was tough to narrow down who made it into the top 5 for me. I've got Jerry Rice, John Elway, Joe Montana, Lawrence Taylor, and then Tom Brady.
That's fair.
The one I left out, which I was juggling between, was Deion Sanders, but I went with Rice instead of him.
That's fair. So my number 5, I'd have to go Walter Payton, Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, LT, and Brady.
All right, so pretty close on the last 3. So
yeah,
well, first 3 really. Next would be who is on your Mount Rushmore of all athletes? I'll let you go first on this one.
Okay, so I'll go with my number 1 is Brady. Number 2, Tiger Woods. Number 3, MJ. And then number 4 was tough. I was deciding between 2. I ended up going Phelps, Michael Phelps, just because of how dominant he was.
Mm-hmm.
But I was deciding between him and Gretzky.
That's a fair one. So I've got Brady, Tiger, MJ. Yep. The fourth one was very tough because Brady obviously is probably the number 1. I would say number 1 athlete overall of any sport.
Yeah.
I don't think that's even negotiable, like even debatable now.
Yeah.
Tiger, just the amount of dominance he's had. MJ as well. The fourth one's tough because Gretzky could be in there. I end up going with kind of a little homerism. So
don't tell me you said David Ortiz.
No, God, no. He was a DH.
Yeah.
Ted Williams.
That's fair.
Even though I don't think he was the best baseball player of all time, but
you could argue he wasn't the best of his era.
But I think this is a very homerism. The fact that this is probably a terrible argument. I'm actually going to change it and say Gretzky. I'm talking about that, how ridiculous my Ted Williams take was. But Ted Williams is probably the greatest hitter that's ever lived. And then the amount of knowledge that he kind of transferred with the book, I'm not sure if you read it or not, The Science of Hitting, was a fantastic book to read. And I'm not even a big reader.
We know that.
Just the amount of knowledge he's able to transfer with that and how
I think Williams is like, he's at least in the conversation of best baseball players ever. I think you could argue either Joe DiMaggio or Mickey Mantle, depending on the era, was better than him, but I think he's still in that conversation. For me, for baseball, it's tough because of the steroid era clouds things. Not considering steroids, I think you have to go Barry Bonds just with how dominant he was, or Babe Ruth, considering how dominant he was for his time versus everyone else, where he was the first to reach the 500 club when no one else was in like the 250 club, but for homers. But I think
I'm going to go Wayne Gretzky now instead, because he was the most dominant hockey player around, and there's been no one really close to him. So
you take out all his goals, he still has the NHL record for most points in a career.
All right, last question, and I kind of alluded to this in the beginning. What are the odds that Brady is not fully retired and he comes back and pulls a Favre?
0.0%.
I'm putting at 25%. I'm not letting this die. He's still not done. He still has 5 years left in the tank.
I think he does. I think if there were no other considerations, no Giselle, if he was still with Bridget Moynihan, I think he plays until he's at least 50, or if barring, assuming he doesn't get a major injury where his shoulder's not the same or his knees cut out or whatever. I think if he wanted to play until, like he said, he sucked or he sees his play declining, I think he could play to 50. I have not seen a drop off. I know even in 2019, I know you and me were debating with a lot of people when everyone was saying, oh, he was washed up. He wasn't. It was that the roster was talent devoid, especially on offense. The offensive line was atrocious. The run game couldn't get anything done. And then the wide receivers couldn't get separation. So that's why he looked like he sucked.
Yeah.
But he hasn't, had any drop off. You could argue he hasn't reached his peak, which is
Mhm.
insane for how old he is. He had the best statistical year of his career. I know he had an insane some really good weapons, but it wasn't like he had all of them every single game. I think they only had one game where they had Mike Evans, Antonio Brown, Gronk, and Chris Godwin. So for I don't know if this was his best year, but you could argue that he hasn't even peaked yet as an athlete,
Mhm.
as a quarterback, which is insane given his age. So I think you could realistically see him playing another 4, 5, 6 years, especially with the new NFL rules where hitting the quarterback is like
Basically
not really
illegal.
allowed. Yeah.
The reason why I put it 25%, number one, he still has a lot left in the tank. Number
Yep.
two, if he does try and come back, if he waits until July or even mid-year or even the following year, I still think he would be in enough shape because I don't think he's going to stop taking care of his body,
Yeah.
based on TB12 method. He'd be able to go to whatever team he wants because he won't be able to go to the Bucks because they're not going to have the salary cap situation to account for him because he can make it very difficult for them. If he comes back, they sign another quarterback or they do something else, they have no cap space left. He decides, no, I'm going to unretire. They have a certain amount of days.
So he pretty much pulls a Gronk before the draft.
Yeah, pulls the Gronk where, or even this is basically what Favre did, where you come back. The NFL, once a player decides they're going to come back, they give the team a little bit of leeway to try and figure out what to do with their cap. It's
Yeah.
not immediately that day they have to do something, but they have, I don't know, within a week, it's probably 3 or 4 days to kind of figure out the situation. So that's not enough time. So either one, they're going to have to cut him to avoid any of that cap implication. They could trade him, which he may say no to, or three, they could restructure his deal. And obviously, he's not going to be restructuring his deal. He's not going to play with the Bucks ever again. So we could see a situation where one, we get that Breeze or River situation where a quarterback gets hurt. There's a team coming down the stretch. They really need some help. And it's a major quarterback that was hurt that they can play for. And he only has to play half a season or something like that. He's got a good shot going to playoffs, maybe winning a Super Bowl. Or two, he works his way to the team that he's always wanted to play for, the team that decided a team that decided to pick Jimmy Garoppolo over him, and go to the 49ers. So I'm still holding out some hope that the 49ers situation happens because I think it'd be a fantastic storyline. It'd also be really interesting just to see if there's another team that's going really well down the stretch and just their quarterback gets hurt. If it wasn't, I don't think it would happen with the Patriots ever. Like, God forbid anything happened to Mac, but because of all the resentment of Tom towards them. But if there's another team that sort of situation where, let's say the Bengals, well, he won't want to go there because it's a miserable place to live, even for like 3 months.
For a year that with those weapons.
Yeah, so maybe in the Bengals or the Chargers, let's say.
Yeah.
But the Chargers, their coach is a moron. So is the Bengals. But
this last game he wasn't.
Yeah. But it's like a situation like that happens where they call him out and I'm like, I'll do it for a few days, like a few months. Like
the thing with me though is like for Favre, for instance, he was retiring and he didn't want to just go through OTAs. Mm-hmm. Like he didn't want to put himself through that. Mm-hmm. I don't think the workload is an issue for Brady. Like, I don't think him saying, "Oh, I only have to play 8 games" is going to make something more desirable for him. I think it's just, especially now with all the business interest, like all the involvement in his business that he's going to be doing, along with the fact that he's mentally come to terms with himself just giving it up. I'm sure that once it gets closer to the season, he'll get that itch, but he's come to terms with it. Giselle's finally happy. I just don't see him ever coming back.
Well, I think that's the other part too, where he's going to be spending more and more time with her. And maybe he might want to get out of the house. So, you know what?
I know he might, but I don't think he ever will.
And then the other fact would be, I just had lost it. I had a whole ramped up and I can't remember what I was going to say. but I think the Arians factor was a big part too, other than the Giselle.
Yeah.
And
Especially with the fact that Arian said that with Leftwich leaving, he was going to be calling
yeah,
the plays.
yeah, I think that was kind of a big portion of him not wanting to do it. But if he could go to a situation where he would like, or even like a short period of time where it's not like the whole season, it could happen.
But
Or maybe
for me, part of the reason why I don't think that's going to be the case is that if he really wanted that to be the situation, I don't think he would have retired this early. I think he
I
would
think
have.
the other. Oh, this is where I was gonna say. In that whole 9-page, 971 word thing on
Yeah,
Instagram, he never once used the words retirement.
I know.
And he said specifically now or for now,
Yeah,
like I cannot put like the effort in or something like that. Where he gave some leeway where if he wants to change his mind, it's not 100% definite that he's saying I'm retiring.
yeah. He also wasn't on the retirement waiver or transaction list today either.
Yeah, the Bucks will put him on the retirement one, but he doesn't have to file it himself. That the
Yeah,
whole filing of retirement thing is basically so they get their pension, the healthcare, that sort of thing, and something like that isn't. I don't think that important to him because he has his money coming from all other things. But
yeah,
I think that was another portion where maybe it does happen. I hope it does happen because
yeah.
I think it's such a waste of his talent and ability to be giving up when he still has it.
Yeah.
And
Because at least for me as a fan, it's going to make you wonder what would it have been like what not only just his records but football in general the next four, like would he have ended up playing to 45 to 50 without getting hurt, without having any decline? And then for him, I'm sure he's wondering the same thing too. So
that's the other question. How far could he have taken this?
Yeah,
Could he have been insane and get even past 50?
yeah,
That is just something that we'll never know if he stays retired, and will be a huge question because we're probably never going to see this again. And maybe we will, just based on, like you said, the rules changing, easier to play. But the problem with that is that we were seeing a lot more mobile quarterbacks, and those careers don't last as long. So
yeah,
you need a pocket passer that's someone of his size and stature. Like even Mac Jones, he's supposedly 6'3" on the thing. He's probably 6'2", maybe 6'1".
yeah,
Not the biggest guy in the world. Can his body withstand 25 years of doing it? I would say more probably no than yes.
yeah,
Even though he is a pocket passer, you would need someone with that bigger stature that is a pocket passer. Joe Burrow is pretty big.
yeah.
If he decides, he's not going to last because the line's going to kill him one day, but someone of that kind of stature, him, a Hebert, Herbert, that sort of thing.
No, that's a really good point.
All right. Well, this will wrap up our pretty long Tom Brady farewell, and hopefully not farewell forever podcast based on what I'm hoping for. So we'll catch you later on this week with we're going to do a whole recap of AFC Championship week and also this Brian Flores situation that's been developing, which is a pretty interesting nugget, and we'll have our thoughts on that.
Also, Josh McDaniels leaving the Patriots.
That's a big one. Completely got overshadowed by everything that happened the last 2 days. So we'll have our thoughts on that. We'll catch you next time when you listen to us. Remember, subscribe, rate, and review at Pat's 300 Level Pod on Instagram and Twitter. We'll talk to you next time.